good morning, good day, and good evening. I'm, as always, your host, Brody Robertson, and a few weeks back, I did a NixOS episode with Tristan Ross, who was a release manager on a recent release of Nix, and I feel like that was a good episode, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, a lot of people did say we got bogged down in terminology, and things could have been explained in a better way, so I guess, how about you both introduce yourself and talk about why we're doing what your like background is with Nix, and why I would even be talking to you about the project.
First, I want to say Tristan is brilliant, and he's a valuable contributor to the Nix ecosystem.
Absolutely.
I think he recently announced that he joined the Nix hardware team. That's really nice.
Awesome. Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I think it was a good episode. I think Tristan does amazing work. It's just we did very much just focus on sort of the terminology rather than the functionality. I think that's a good way to put it.
The classic Nix pitfall.
Right.
You're trying to enlighten someone, and then you've bored them to death and scared them away. And
can both of you introduce yourself? Pick one of you to go first.
Let me start. Oh, okay, yeah.
Go ahead.
My name's Farid. My voice is a bit hoarse. Sorry. We'll try to make it go well over this chat. An engineer by trade. I've been using Nix non-professionally for 10 years. Sort of pseudo-professionally for several, maybe 5 years. I got to introduce it at some teams at Google, and now I'm at Confluent. And I just finished a PhD where Nix helped me do a lot of the reproducible software that you need to do when you submit, and it's Nix adjacent. So yeah.
Okay. How about you go?
My name is Shahar, or you can call me Dawn, it's easier. For the last few years, I centered my work around Nix and its ecosystem. I've been doing a Nix podcast. So far, I think it's the only Nix podcast for over a year. It's called Full-Time Nix. You can find it on your favorite podcast app. I saw that the video you made with Tristan, and it was interesting, and I probably learned something I don't remember by now. But yes, Tristan is a deep thinker, and he'll give you all the technical answers. But for the general, should I use a NixOS Linux? I think we need to answer some very general questions first.
Well, I've had a lot of it. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I was inspired to contact you, Brody, and I invited Farid as well to join us.
Well, I appreciate that. Before we get into like the main thing of Nix and all that, why did you decide to do a Nix podcast? Because that's a very niche topic to do a podcast on.
And that's a good reason, right? Get a niche and try to provide value to your listeners. And as I said, there wasn't one at the time, and try to grow, and maybe it'll contribute to my reputation. Maybe that will allow me to make a living off of doing Nix-related things. I want to do open source development primarily, and I'd love to get sponsored to do that. And I know some people who, in one way or another, are getting sponsored to work on open source in the Nix ecosystem. And I have enjoyed some of that as well. And I'd like that to continue to grow.
Fair enough. Okay.
For myself and for others.
So
did you guys, I didn't listen to the whole episode. Did you guys get into the drama at all with Tristan?
I I don't really know much about it myself. I've got like a very surface level look at it. So I didn't really know where to even start with that. If you want to talk about that, we can.
I don't want to touch it. I just
Okay, fair enough. People send me links every so often, and every time I decide I want to go look into it, I realize there's about 4 hours of reading I need to do to get like caught up on everything that's been going on, and then I decide not to do it. So I'm not too sure on the details there.
Yeah. It's like, a frustrating thing, but I actually think it's not a good sign. That sounds nihilistic, but like, it's just a sign of a growing community going through, and I saw it in Python and Software Foundation and other popular Linux distros. So it's just like a classic growing pain.
Right. So
as the stakes grow higher, as users use it more and they use it for more important things, well, then they care more, and then the drama intensifies.
Right.
Anyways, yeah, sorry.
No, it's all good, good. If you want to derail, go any direction, feel free to bring up a topic. If I've said this to plenty of other people, the less that I have to talk, the better I think the episode is going.
Yeah. I got, we have plenty of things. Nix is like, the beauty of Nix is it does everything. So you could also talk about, it's like the bottom floor. It's a philosophy of building software. So it's like I was just listening today about like, I'm in the States and we're doing trade wars. So unfortunately, and they're doing tariffs. And this podcast I was listening to is trying to talk about how to decide the country of origin for tariffs. So in the US, they do this whole like essence test. What is the essence of the software? And at some level, like that's what Nix is, like essence. It's like how to, and you see this because there's like derivatives. So like we're talking about Nix. I like to use the word in my PhD, I call them store systems. Things that put things into a store. It's like folder, like not your normal folders. Like, Nix, it's called the Nix store. And Geeks, it's Geek store. I work with people in SPAC is another very popular one, high performance computing. They have their own store. So it's this like thing on how to totally build software. And then all these other things kind of matriculate and fall out of it. So it's, I don't know, you can get like really philosophical.
Before we get really philosophical, I think we should answer the very simple question, just for anyone who might have clicked this and has no idea what's going on. What is NixOS? Just at that initial question. And I'm sure that can take us in a lot of directions, but at a high level, what is this distro? And then also, what is the Nix package manager? Because this can be used separately from the distro itself.
I think I would go for like describing what is the typical Linux distro. How does that work? My first Linux distro experience was when I was about 16, and that was, what was it, 2003 something. And it's been until now, it's greatly improved in all sorts of ways. But the premise is that I have an install. I boot something, a live. Back then, I booted a live CD. Now we don't do that anymore. And then you install it. And then we start making modifications. We install some other service, some other desktop environment. We go into our settings and configure it. I remember that recent PewDiePie video that I'm so happy about, that we get so much exposure and so many people will learn about Linux, that there is an alternative, and that it's finally not so hard and not so far-fetched to use it. And I'm happy that it's so easy. But the problem is that it's not very maintainable. Right? We make these modifications to our systems, but the way I like I said, we don't get to keep them. We just get to make them. And so then there are solutions to these problems. Get a collection of my dot files in my home directory and put it in a Git repository. Use some sort of backup scheme, and those solutions they typically work to some degree. But it's not optimal. It's not optimal, and that's where all this talk about build systems. That's where this is a game changer. NixOS is built. It's a product of a build system. The entire thing. It's from the top level, my OS, to the dot files in my home directory. It is one big tree of dependencies. And that there's a lot of practical value that we can talk about. That is a product of that approach.
It's a big tree of dependencies. This was something we did touch on with Tristan, where in NixOS, everything is managed under the Nix system, as opposed to what you would have with a regular distro, where things are sort of spread out across everywhere in your system. Like on Arch, if I wanted to go change some little system configuration file, there'll be a tool to do it. There's a file somewhere, but it's probably going to be consistent across distros. But the way that you interact with it isn't going to be consistent, and trying to replicate a system onto another one with something like Arch or something like Ubuntu, there are ways to do it, but it's not something built into the core structure of what the distro is.
Right. The workflow. Go ahead.
Well, there's one more, and it's like what's tough is like which way do you want to tackle NixOS? And this is like the conundrum, like outside in or inside out. You know, outside in, I think you sometimes fail to see the marvel, and then inside out, like starting with Nix, it's like you get bogged down in the details.
Right.
But there's like one important distinction with NixOS is all these other distros, those collections of common folders, etc lib, bin, user bin, it's called the FHS, the file system hierarchy standard. So that's like some standard that most distros follow. And the central problem that Nix is trying to solve is folders have a small key space. What do I mean by key space is like you can only have one name under a folder. I want library gung-ho. I can only have like lib gung-ho once. Maybe I could put like version 1, 2, 3. But let's say I want like version 1 at this commit. It has to have that name. Like there's a lot of underlying things that require that. And we can dive deeper into that, but like Nix solves that. And NixOS lets you take a collection of packages and construct a distribution with, and then like goes even further and lets you do that with Nix the language. So it gets like even more insane. But like a distribution, the thesis, which is pretty readable, at least the first half. That wasn't an insult to Ilko. Sorry, I just meant like the first half is much more readable. Talks about how to build software, and then he just layers and he says like, well, once you know how to deliver a file, once I could build a file, Linux's beauty, Unix, is saying everything's a file. And then a distribution is just a collection of files. So if I can just create a package, which is a package of packages, well, that's a distribution. So if you can build one package in Nix, you can build a package of packages, and a distribution is just a package of packages. I mean, everything about how Linux works is files. You want to run systemd, put these systemd configuration files in etc. You want to do something else, put this file here in etc. So it's just like files on disk at very specific places, and you're done. So I don't know. Yeah.
No, I
NixOS
think...
action.
Sorry?
Yeah, I was gonna say NixOS at its core, I think, is a collection of files.
Mhm.
And then maybe Don can go into more. It's like, I think then it goes really. I think where people have the problem with it is that it needs this new language because you also
Right.
configure it. You don't have to, right? I think that's just like the current status quo.
Mhm.
You have to use the Nix language, and it is likely off-putting to many people because it's functional, and that's
Mhm.
very different than a typical imperative way of thinking, especially when you think of like more advanced functional concepts like infinite recursions and stuff like that. So
For anyone who might not have as much of a programming background, can you just explain the difference between imperative and a functional approach?
I'd say there's three. I want to draw a distinction. There's imperative,
Mhm.
and then there's declarative, which is like, and then there's I think imperative programming can be also functional and non-functional.
Mhm.
There's like a couple of like different joint sets. So imperative programming is like when you do a line by line, and it's like how you might think of running through a list of tasks, and they're temporal. So like a task earlier on has to be done before the task after it, and you're just running through a sequence. Declarative programming, if someone has ever heard of SQL, that's like writing a list of tasks, not even a task, you're writing what you want done,
Mhm.
and you're leaving it up to the thing, the computer, the person, whatever, to go execute your plan.
Mhm.
So you might say, instead of like how to make a burrito, all the different steps, you just say like, give me a burrito.
Mhm.
And it's up to them to figure out all the beauty, And the beautiful thing is you just articulate what you want and you store it and you say, I just want a burrito. And you really don't care about all the actual steps in the order. Maybe they want to put rice first or beans. It doesn't matter.
Mhm.
So that's declarative. People love declarative because you get to the root of what the problem is and you don't get bogged down in the steps. And then you can optimize. You like decouple the ask of the request and the steps to do it, and then someone who's like an expert in planning or whatever can go off and do that.
Mhm.
Functional programming is a different way of doing I'd say imperative programming, and the key distinction is you try not to use state.
Mhm.
Every line is almost they like to use the word pure
Mhm.
meaning it relies on no state, so you can like shuffle these lines in any order and still get the same outcome. That's functional programming at its core. I don't know. These are hard concepts to kind of.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Um,
like,
and
and some computer science laureate is probably like yelling at a cloud as he hears me.
oh, I know. I have at least a couple of Haskell fans in my viewership, so I'm sure they they will go very hard on what are the benefits of functional programming and why everyone should love it. I think the main the main issue with functional programming is imperative is it's a very how to say steps in the real world are very transferable to an imperative process. Like even if you don't have a programming background, you can walk through what is happening in a Python code base, for example, and understand each step that is going on and logically break down that problem in a way that, like, if you're like, how do I build a chair, right? You think about that in an imperative way. You grab the nail, you grab the wood, you hammer the nail into wood. Like, this makes sense. Functional, you really have to think of it in a I don't know. I don't know the best way to describe this. This is the problem. Anytime you start talking functional programming, it's like how do I describe how this works? I
May I
think
show you some? May I share my screen? Show some
go right ahead.
Nix
Yeah.
code. By the way, do you know what the most popular programming language in the world is?
I would have guessed something like a JavaScript, but you're gonna say something different.
I think it's Excel. Microsoft Excel.
Hmm.
And that's a functional programming language. Here's where I store all my. I have two desktops, one laptop here, and I'm going to go into some file here, and for example, this one. There are no functions here. This is all a big literal header set from the top to the bottom. It's declarative. It says Flake modules, NixOS, PC. So I have a NixOS module that is called PC. And in it, I'm declaring that for example, this one, under boot, kernel params, I want this kernel param, that kernel param. And I want to enable Plymouth so that I have nicer, quiet graphical boot. Of course, there are functions as well. Here is a more, let's say, this is a function. When you see a colon, it's a function. And here is how you make bindings. And this is the body of the function from here all the way down. And here is a pipe operator. And this is the power of Nix and NixOS, and also the deficiency of it, because you gotta put in the effort, put in the time to figure it out. And I wish, I put in the effort, so I feel like I have superpowers that the Arch Linux user doesn't have. But I've put in so much effort, and there is no book that you could pick up. What NixOS for newbies, NixOS for Linux users,
right?
Something like that. I wish there was, and I invite everyone who has the time, have the time to look into it, to put in the effort, because once you know it, it gives you, like I said, superpowers. There's a lot of value in it.
I want to give a contrasting one to that. I think someone at the last Nix conference called Planet Nix in North America demoed they were using NixOS to power their schools. He was like from Oregon. I wish I could remember his name. They bought a bunch of Chromebooks. He got a bunch of donated Chromebooks and ran NixOS on them, and just put the Flatpak app server on it and gave it back to the school. They don't know they're running NixOS. They're just running Flatpak. But he's able to configure the other stuff that you might want, like a reboot cycle. Like, he's a system administrator for that school. He did all the setup. They don't know they're running NixOS. I consider that a huge win. They're getting a lot of the power and efficacy of NixOS, but they might not need to write NixOS configurations in the same way. Look at all the people that use Linux. I mean, clearly a lot of them just want something that mimics a really turnkey distribution like Ubuntu or whatever, and they don't want to do Linux from scratch or Arch or Gentoo. So I used to be really hard on pushing people to Nix, and I've gotten a little more I have this central one sentence, part of Nix. The problem is software works pretty good already. You use Nix and you think, holy shit, nothing should be working. You really come away with that. You're like, how is anything working? but we're on this video camera, things are working, and it's because like a bunch of other people are spending so much time fixing their software. Like the care and effort Don put into his own personal app, people are putting into all their software, so it works in all these bespoke cases, and like that's cool, but it also devalues. Like Nix is saying, like you don't have to do that, and we'll make it work just without that. But everyone's still doing all that work. So I don't know. I still love it. I mean, we could talk about how much joy I think you can hear from his voice when he talks about it. Like people that love control and like knowing what's going on, and that's why I run NixOS. Like brings me immense joy. But a lot of people are like, should I use it? I'm like, no. Like there's some other Nix stuff I steer them towards first to get them hooked. But yeah, because I've been bitten. Like I have them use NixOS. Inevitably, they hit a paper cut. It's software. It has a bug, and and for me to attract them, the first thing I did was like I told them like this is perfect software. Like this is gonna solve all your problems.
Right. And you said the expectation's way too high then.
Way too high, and the reality is also the delta is like not that far, because most software. I have more trouble running some software now on NixOS than I do on a normal Linux distribution. Like that's messed up. That's weird. Because like NixOS should be. I mean, once I get it to run on NixOS, I've told myself like it'll run forever perfectly, and like that's the goal. But as a new user, if you're being inspired to use NixOS because it's like things are going to work, like that's the sales pitch, like software that works, it's reproducible, reliable, and you come on, you open NeoVim or VS Code, and it just starts like flashing error messages because it's doing things that don't work. You're gonna be like, what the heck is going on? Especially without the understanding of like it's trying to rebuild things from the ground up. That said, I think like people that usually use Linux love control. Like if you're already starting off as a Linux user, I think you skew more in the like I like what's going on with my machine.
Right.
Like that's the beauty of Linux that I don't like. I have to use a MacBook for work. Like the beauty that you can just grep the root and find some knob is like amazing. And then twiddle it. So I think like it's okay. Like I'll still push people. Definitely like their Windows or Mac. I don't know. They're lost already. So I don't know. Like that's something we can keep talking about it, Don. But that's like I don't know. That's too spicy. Like I'm on a chat about Pro Nix, and I'm kind of like, yeah.
No, I do think it is good to be honest about the state that things actually are in, because I will often see people talk about Nix as if, I'll get these comments like Nix solves that, Nix solves this. Like you get these comments from time to time, and yeah, I'm sure Nix does solve a lot of problems, but I don't really hear people talk about what can go wrong with it. Besides the fact that the functional programming is, it's functional programming. You get what you get with functional programming. The introduction is kind of... I don't think I know anyone who uses Nix who would disagree that the introduction to Nix is not as good as it could be. And there could be better resources out there to onboard people into making use of these tools. But I don't really hear people talk about those issues that come with actually using it and things that might go wrong because of the file structure, because things aren't maybe set up correctly to work inside of Nix and things like that.
Yes. For example, that VS Code example. I think one of the issues I've encountered when I don't use VS Code these days, but when I did Home Manager, I used to install a VS Code via Home Manager and to configure it via Home Manager. It's a lot of value because I can declare all the settings and all the extensions I want via home manager. It's all tracked in my my Git repo. But then what I cannot do is ask VS Code via itself to go in and change some configuration. Because it cannot, because the configuration file is a read-only file in the Nix store.
Right.
And sometimes VS Code wants to do that, and it kind of, you know, sorts of, like, it asks you a question. I don't remember exactly. It asks you a question, and you say yes or no, and then it says, okay, I will remember what you said. But what is remembering? It's like setting some config option, and then it gives you an error. Cannot write to my config option. So there's a mismatch between how Nix wants to use programs and how programs expect to be used sometimes.
Right.
With simpler utilities, you know, maybe they don't write to their own configuration file. Many programs don't write to their own configuration files, but many programs do. So it's kind of an inversion of control. And that's exactly what we mean by Nix solves that. Git, for example, another program that can write to its own. When you do git config with the global flag, it can write to the git to the user's git configuration file. But Nix solves that. It solves that in a greater level. Like, I want everything to be done via Nix. So I give up that feature of the app trying to configure itself. So you have to do an extra step. You have to. I don't even know how it works. Maybe you have to tell VS Code, hey, don't bother trying to do this thing again. That's a paper cut.
Yeah, software just needs to be so curated to work. It needs to be developed with NixOS in mind, or it's like a lot of labor and love. It's like the ultimate yak shave to get things to work. The amount of software that wants to self-update, for instance, that's a classic one. That needs to be patched away.
Well, we're on Discord right now.
Discord.
Using Discord from the browser.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
That's my answer on NixOS for a lot of things. Is and Linux, like, because the Linux installable versions of things tend to suck. But yeah, like, if there's a really great maintainer, that software is going to be great. But for a lot of things, it's like someone just wanted some working version of it. Nix packages is great. It's very easy to get started. They throw it in there, but it's got a lot of these paper cuts.
Right.
And like, I don't know, your software is like, the paper cuts matter. Like, that's that sheer amount of them, you know, like, I don't know what the audit is. They do a big community survey. Nix has a lot of people. You could use it like as a home manager, as a homebrew. If you're from Mac, Get, it's got a big install base. People use NixOS on the server. I think probably the next largest, because you care less about these paper cuts. It's like, it's there, it's in the cloud, it's running, I don't care.
Right.
NixOS people running on your laptops, which I do, or your personal desktop. Like, when I went to NixCon, like, you know, way smaller, because you have to be a masochist to want to deal with these paper cuts. And like, it's joy, actually. Like, and I think that's what you find right now. That's kind of the niche of the community, is like, you want to like yak shave all the way through. And if you guys don't know what yak shave is, it's a saying where like one task leads to another, and you're like endlessly, you went to start to do something, and now you're like doing you're shaving a yak, as the saying goes. So, you know, like, I'll just fire up my laptop sometimes, and I'm like, I like hacking. I'm like, I'll open it up, something breaks, and I'll just pull on that thread and go fix it. Like, that's probably not for most people. Yeah, it's attractive. Yeah.
How about I put things into perspective a little bit from my own repository? I have this. Am I sharing screen successfully? Yes. There's this program called Tokay. Yeah, Tokay, and I run it in my infra repo. and it'll tell me I have 221 Nix files here with 3,740 lines. And that's for 2 desktops, 1 laptop. That's but there's much of this is actually a. No, I see that the log file. This is the log file. Yeah, so Nix, and all this is Nix that I wrote. And if we look at the Git log, how do you see how many Git commits I had in a repo? I think quickly I can do that on GitHub. GH repo view
git log and then grep commit. I guess that would be an easy way to do it. I don't know the command for Git.
It's more than 1,000 commits. Since I first started. I don't even remember. This repository might have actually started not as a Nix repository. It might have been my dot files before I ever used Nix. But these very frequent changes. Another piece of perspective is we talked about Nix packages, right? How many packages there are and the quality of the packages in there. They have paper cuts, they don't have paper cuts. There's this website called Repology, and in it there's this page with graphs. I'll go to the second graph here, not the first one. First, this is the number of packages in the repository, and this is the number of fresh packages. Fresh means that the version of the package in the repository is the same as the latest release of that software. And that's typically what the PC Linux user wants. They want the latest release. So here we can see, for example, the Fedora curve, various versions of Fedora, what packages they have. Here's Ubuntu. It's quite clearly a leader of a number of packages and also how fresh they are. And all sorts of other distros. His homebrew over here, not very impressive. Is OpenSUSE around here. And most distros they don't have a great number of packages and they're not very fresh.
Right.
Where's Arch, I wonder? Here's an Arch one.
Oh, yep.
Here's an Arch one, 32.
Usually the AUR
an Arch
is
one.
pretty high up there.
Arch, that's the Arch user repository?
Weird.
Yeah, it's like...
I'm not sure I'm seeing it.
Anyway,
and this is a zoomed in. Sorry, this is zoomed in onto main cluster of repositories. That's what this graph is. Why? Because if we scroll to the first graph, the real graph, complete graph, we see that Nix packages puts them all to shame. Sorry for the. That's pretty much what it does.
Right.
In the number of packages, even the Nix packages stable 2111. I don't even know how that works. How does Nix packages stable 2111 have greater number of fresh packages? Well, it's a number of fresh packages. That kind of makes sense. It doesn't mean that the set of packages that the PC Linux user would care about are fresher than Ubuntu or Arch.
Right. Oh no, on something like Arch, there's a lot of packages which probably should be in the main repos, which are relegated to the AUR, like random drivers for little things and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly my point.
I don't know if I know this graph well. Well, in the sense I've seen it a lot. Not well, and I've always wondered if they filter out the package set. Like Nix packages is famous for having a lot of like unnecessary. What I mean by unnecessary is it has every Python pack, or like it has most of the PyPI packages. It has almost every node package. It has every Haskell package. True, Debian and all these other ones also have Python packages to some extent, so that part might have some similarities, but they've done it for every language. To a large part, that could be contributing to maybe the sheer number of size. It's also missing a third dimension, which is like correctness. I think I just want to bring like that fairness angle to it. Like we were just talking about paper cuts, and you can have like 2 million packages, whatever that means, that are fresh, but if they're all begging to be updated, hyperbolically and on NixOS, and they don't work well, it's not really meaningful. I don't know how you really track that across that.
No, it's too much details, right? Like it's even how would I be able to tell that NixOS is a nicer experience than Arch? How would I be able? And I'm very particular. I have my Sway window manager currently. I want to switch to Hyperland. I have a very specific set of programs that I use. I have my own notification thingy. But even a GNOME user, I set up GNOME for my wife on her computer using NixOS. How do I know that GNOME experience is nicer than these things take research. But what I do know is that I enjoy great benefits. And we can talk about them. We can showcase them. I can demonstrate them.
I think it's not a fully objective way to verify it, but I think a good rule of thumb on the quality of the packages is your experience using Nix, because you're both fairly active, in like with Nix. How often do you run into things where there are paper cuts, where you have to go and fix something? Like, is this a common occurrence? Is it once every couple of weeks? Multiple times a day? Like, what are we dealing with here?
Well, yeah, here's from my Git history. Did I share here? I set up auto login. I bumped the inputs. Just launched Sway using key binding.
No, but Don, you should answer like
this is.
You have. You should have.
I'm looking
right off the bat.
I'm looking for some problem that I've solved, and I know that maybe if I search for workaround here, here's a workaround for some Nix issue, or I don't even know. This is Nix itself. If I search for GitHub here, or like issues, I will find some GitHub, some comments. There are links. I don't know. Stellarium had a bug, so I commented it out for now. Here's a bug in Qt browser. I think it's an upstream bug, not a packaging bug. I think it's a bug in Qt.
I think it's
sometimes there are things.
It's also your propensity to, like, I hit them pretty frequently, but I don't change them. I'm like, that's what, like, my VS Code.
Sorry,
right now.
one thing before you go on with that. If there's nothing more you need to show on the stream, can you close that so it doesn't? Yeah, thank you. Awesome. Sure. It just breaks my overlay if it's there.
I get used to the thing, and it's like your capability to be okay with like some imperfections is probably like my VS Code does this. One of them that bugs me a lot, and I don't know how to solve it. It'll just randomly scroll away. Like I'll tab back to a file and I'll just scroll. I only get it on my NixOS VS Code. I don't know why it's doing that. When stuff like that happens, I either like I'm okay with it, or I switch to a different tool. That's happened a little bit. It's like this one weird thing has given me this weird error. So it's not always like it needs a fix on my part. It could have just been like I'm dealing with it or I've abandoned it. And then I don't change the act of changing. I think we like to talk about, like, you get to a point where you've curated your machine. Like, there is probably some other graph of how much changes your repo sees over time. Once you get to some like base level, I don't tweak with it that much. I'm just installing a few packages here or there. Like I extracted all that joy out of it already, getting it to that point, and then it's pretty much, I'll be like, oh, there's this new. I was just learning about this command shell history at Twin. I'll give that a shot. Installed it. It didn't work really well right away for me. Especially, might not even been NixOS. I use fish shell. Might have been like something like that. Just remove it from my line and move on. And I can do that safely. Like, that's the NixOS. That's probably the most resounding sales pitch I tell, is like, you can try, and there's a lot of other tools that let you do this. Try out software, try out a change, and not commit. So it's like, I have that fearless mentality. I might have a lot of paper cuts, but I'm like pretty fearless about the change.
Right.
Like, I might see a snippet from Don's infra, and I could probably like copy the line. I want to try whatever he's doing. Like, I want that monkey banana click thing. Try it. Crashes everything. I don't know why. Okay, remove it. I'm back to like exact, I'll say 99% exact same, because some programs can write state, but for the most part, it's fearless. And that part's great.
When you talk about paper cuts and sort of having extracted out a lot of that like early fun from it, I think like a good comparison point, it's not exactly the same, but anyone who's used a tiling window manager which is very, very heavy on configuration, like a BSPWM, where you start with a black screen. Nothing, like, it's a completely useless tiler out of the box. You need to start using the BSPC tool, write all your hotkeys by yourself, configure how you want windows to be placed, and or like any sort of manual tiler as well, where it's weird and it might be very strange to someone who doesn't know your system, but once you have it at a point where you're happy with it, even if there are still problems, you know what the problems are. You know how to navigate around those problems so they don't get in your way. But if someone else used your system, they would immediately realize, oh, how do you live with this?
Totally. And I think, yeah. Sorry, you're going to say something, Don?
How about... what about more demonstrations?
Sure, yeah, if you got a demonstration you want to share.
Show off. Yeah. So let's give an example of, let's say I want to start playing around with a new shell called new shell. And I do want to start playing around with it. So I will, in some traditional Linux distro, I would go something like apt install new shell or whatever, which is not the case in NixOS. The first thing I can do is I can go nix shell, nix packages, hash. Let's see, is it new or is it new shell? Let's try new. Probably not new. Let's see, maybe new shell. New shell. What this does fairly quickly is it added new shell from Nix packages to the Nix store. So and you can see my shell level is 2. I have this tweak that shows me my shell level. So I'm in a subshell right now. That subshell has new shell in the path. So I can now I can have new. I can step into the new shell and do whatever, and I can try it out. And do this with many programs, with GUI programs as well. Works the same. Now I've closed new shell, and I will step out of this X shell with Control D, and I'll try running new, and it's not here. But it is in my store. So if I do enter the shell again, it'll be instant. Does that make sense? Let's see where, when I do which new, you can see it's not in like user bin, right? It's in the Nix store under some hash. So it's clean.
Right.
I didn't bother my system.
You have comma installed, by the way. Like I think comma is one that I show off, especially at
comma is
work.
nice. Yeah.
Do you have that?
What's comma?
There, it's a program that typically is provided as comma. Comma is the command, so if you can see, it's quite small because it's a comma. But here's a comma character. And now I can something that I Atuin that we mentioned. I don't have it. So lolcat.
Yeah,
lolcat. You can see I don't have lolcat. So I will use comma lolcat.
And then put a file after.
A file?
It just cats a file in rainbow color.
Let's try.
Have a readme.
A readme. This readme.
Okay. Yeah. There you go.
And
it ran.
It executed it from Nix packages.
You didn't need to know. What's cool about that is you didn't need to know the package name. You just need to know the binary you want.
Right.
So you don't need to know the Nix package name. You don't. How it works is there's this big database. Like someone has collected all the packages that are built and indexed them and found all the things under bin. So when you write lolcat or new shell, it knows, oh, it's from this package. Oh, I'll do the step he was just demoing before. I'll do Nix shell. I'll download it. I'll enter the shell. I'll run but it like seamlessly does that all with comma. Like it's so seamless that a lot of times there's probably some apps I use daily at this point, some of them that I should put in my NixOS config. I've just gotten so much in the habit of just putting comma in them. It's like they're there. I just comma them all the time. It's like I haven't fully committed like I want them in my NixOS config, but I've used them for like a month straight. So I don't know. It's like
Let's say you did want to put them in your OS config.
Okay.
And so this is my desktop. So I would do something like go into the editor here and lolcat, right? Okay, so lolcat. Where would I put that? Let's say I want lolcat. What is it? I have this module called visuals. Currently, it's about this is boot visuals. Maybe text. No. Well, let's make a new one because I don't know where it fits. Let's make a new one. Let's call it, save it under modules. Oh wait, I have something called vanity.
I'll say, by the way, his config is a little more I'm trying to find the right adjective here, but it's like
advanced.
Yeah, that's
right.
The fact that it's got all these files and you can do one big file and it doesn't need to be so intricate. You know, he's running, he said, 3 different machines, so he wants some modularity and he's sharing things and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And so yeah.
Years ago, I started with one file. You can go through the Git history, you'll find it where it's one file. So I add this lolcat here. Is it called lolcat? Yes, it's, and I have nice tooling that I see the version. And I'll save this file. Now I will do NixOS switch dot. Wait, one of the downsides of Nix is this evaluation time, because there's a step of evaluating this Nix language files into what's called a derivation. That's before that derivation is built. Now that's finished, and now the derivations are being built. You can see a nice tree here, because everything up the tree must be rebuilt. Does that make sense?
Right. So,
and this is the top of the tree. This is the entire top level OS.
So what is this this derivation?
How about I finish this showing off this little point I want to make, and then we can...
Yeah, easy.
So here I get a list of changes. This thing, I'm not sure what it is, but it's changed its
Ruby
version.
file of some sort?
Well, it seems that lolcat is implemented in Ruby. So yes, that makes sense. Now here's lolcat itself. These are all additions, added packages. I'll say, well, okay, it sounds good. Type in my password to make the change, and this will apply it. It'll what it does, it creates a new generation, which it means a new variant or a new version of my OS, and it activates it as well. That's what switch does. Now it's activated. Now I'm already in the upgraded, the new generation. And in here, I should have lolcat. And I have lolcat. So let's say...
Sorry, pause. Do we want to explain more? Like, let me know if you want to or not.
Yeah,
I'm gonna ask,
we can... I want to finish this point.
Yeah, but okay.
Can show generations what they are.
Okay,
I can show it.
I was going to just use words for it. But that was it. Yeah, we can do it.
It's like what is the better word for a generation?
I mean, it's just a symlink. Like, I was just going to be like, it's just a fucking... can we swear? It's just
go ahead. And just don't say anything you don't want a recording of. Anything else is fine.
Okay. It's just a symlink.
Yeah, it is. It is just symlinks. The biggest of...
I use, instead of, you asked what derivation is, I just like, it's just a recipe. Sometimes I use that word and people like attune to it better. I'm like, it's just a recipe file. And they're like, oh, okay. And then we can move on.
Yes, we can show what they are as well. So I'm going to add this. I decided I want to keep this change. I'll keep this. I'll commit this. I'll say lolcat. I added it. Now I'm committing it. And now I'm pushing it. Oh, well, it seems like I made some changes.
Not a Nix problem. That's a Git problem.
Yeah, and this is actually a good demonstration. I made some changes from my laptop because yesterday I was out. I was at a cafe and I was using my laptop. So let's do a git rebase origin main. That should solve the problem. Did it solve? Let's get log here. Right, I'm behind origin main.
Now we're dealing with Git instead of Nix.
Fetch?
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a podcast.
I needed to fetch. Now it's successfully rebased, and now I can push it.
Okay.
Now, because I put it under what's for me is a home manager module called base, which I use in my laptop as well. All I need to do when I open up my laptop Sunday when I go somewhere is git pull. And then, so I'll do git pull there, and then I'll do NixOS switch dot. And I will have the same change from my desktop.
I got to use that tool. I don't use NH. It looks pretty cool.
I recommend it. Yeah. Shall we demonstrate what generations are?
Sure, yeah.
So I think I wrote this little tool for myself called Generation Manager.
Mhm.
I need to run it as root because I don't remember the invocation of.
What you could do
the-
is if you say which of one of your programs, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to see your Nix profile.
Mhm.
And then that profile, it's just a tree of symlinks. Nix.
It's somewhere like
No, but just think, do which one.
Yeah, you want me to do which lolcat and then.
Yeah, there you go. So you can now.
But my generations for the system are system ones. They're not in here, right?
I think
So
it's
to
going to
go
be to there.
Nix var Nix, profiles, system, and is that it? System somewhere. Well, I can find out if I look at my generation manager.
Mhm.
Its implementation does. This is Nix var Nix profile system, and what it does is calls Nix and with profile list generations. So that's like it's Nix and sudo Nix and profile system, or is it the entire path? Yeah, Nix var Nix. Sorry, profile Nix var Nix profile system list generations.
Okay.
Let me. I don't know. Like Nix had a few huge ahas.
Okay.
And one of them was there was something that was like a base problem before Nix solved it called the multi-file update problem.
Mhm.
You wanted to install. Let me know if this is getting too pedantic.
No,
I think
this is great.
Go into it.
Okay. So they wanted to. You'll see. I'll tie it into this, and then you'll be like, "Oh, okay,
Okay.
that makes sense." So there was this problem called the multi-file update problem. What do I mean by like that? You want to do apt-get yum whatever install. You're downloading more than one file. If you're installing them all onto your machine at one time, you have this problem. Like imagine if the power cord gets unplugged.
Mhm.
You're left with like an inconsistent state, right? You've updated one file and not the other. RPM, apt-get, they ended up they sort of solved this by like trying to track and then they roll back and they have all this like state tracking and it's incredibly complicated.
Yeah.
Nix's beauty.
1 second. Do we still need the visual here? Or can we close the window capture? Sweet. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, so Nix's beauty was by solving this with, again, base primitives. So Nix solves the multi-update file problem, and how it does that is the realization through the use of symlinks. So I'm going to talk about it, and we could demo it if it's not clear with talking about it. But the premise is simple. You want to install 3 files, make a temporary directory, or in this case, in the store, it's not really temporary. Shove them all there. And then once you're guaranteed everything got downloaded, cut over a symlink as your final step. That symlink cutover is atomic. Like it either worked or didn't. It's your last step, and then you could report year 6. And because it's atomic and you're getting all the files, all or nothing, you're never in an inconsistent state. And it's that concept. Like that's what a generation is. Every system is just like when he did that rebuild thing. They made a new folder, put everything in there. You could have pulled the power plug. Doesn't matter. It gets tossed away. We didn't change anything. Okay, this time we didn't pull the power. Puts everything in this folder, and then it says, "I finished." And then it cuts over this symlink to this new thing, and that symlink is like your bin. It's the root of. You can think of it as the root of your file system, the bin, the everything. So suddenly, all your bin paths, like, now find lolcat because it's pointing at this brand new root. So I just find like generation, and then so generations are just like all these previous folders that you've just symlinked away from. And that's why Nix you could, like, it's kind of unnecessary now with Git, because you can kind of just like keep rolling forward by rolling back. You can just check out an old commit and rebuild it. But Nix lets you say, like, pick any of these old ones and point your symlink back to it, and just that old machine. So that's like, I keep thinking like Nix took all these like really basic. That was what I thought was the beauty. He saw the landscape, Ilko, and he said, "This is what I have available." Like, he wants to radically redesign software, but they said, like, given what's available, what can we use? So there's a lot of pragmatism in it. And, it's like, I got symlinks, I got this other stuff. He's got a couple other cool things maybe a little too nerdy that they do, but yeah, such a simple thing. And then, like, that's what bleeds out of it.
But if your machine doesn't boot with a new generation, right? Because it has a new kernel, has a incompatibility with some of your hardware. It doesn't even boot. If I do an NixOS rebuild, I use NH, but the canonical one is NixOS rebuild switch, then I don't get to use the new kernel yet.
Right.
But let's say I did a switch and then I rebooted as well, and it doesn't boot. Well, my bootloader has a menu entry for each generation that is still on my machine. So at boot, I can choose which generation of this OS I want to boot into. That solves a big problem. I remember PewDiePie saying I had a problem with my graphics
he's
driver
an
or
NVIDIA
something,
user on his laptop.
and I had to reinstall the OS. And we NixOS users Nix solves that. Nix fixes that. I have not reinstalled for so long. This installation, this desktop installation, I think I've been rolling it with it for a few years. I've even transferred it from one storage device to another storage device.
Have you tried Impermanence, Don? I've never been that zealot to do it, but
no. That's very much an extra feature.
What is Impermanence?
It's a mechanism that can be added onto NixOS where it's like if I don't specify what paths should be kept, like where I store my data, my state, like my home directory would be one of them, or subdirectories in my home directory would be some of them. Then everything else will be wiped at boot.
Okay.
But it's kind of a OCD, keep my system fresh kind of mechanism.
Right.
I don't know what it's for really. That's a bit much for me. So I never used it.
It's for like proving, because even with NixOS, it's easy for you to have impurities. Like you might have relied on some state file that you didn't mean to or something. Again, it's like these it's also a bit of a pyramid game, right? Like we're constantly trying to outdo each other in this community, I guess, with our zeal for purity. And so that is a mechanism, like he explained, that like you shut down when you turn off your computer on every fresh, it's like starting from a live CD, brand new, fresh car smell. You saved a file and you didn't tell it to save that file, it was gone. It's gone. So like there's no way in between restarts for you to maintain any impurity, because like that impurity is gone. So like really quickly you're gonna face like, this thing was working last boot and now it's not. How come? And eventually you get it to the point where like, if it works, it's quote unquote, it might be neat that it's, then you could like tattoo your arm that like, state free or something. But yeah.
You have you end up with a white list of paths that you know, here my state lives. Here and only here the state that I care about lives. That can be valuable for some, I suppose.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but sorry.
Gotta choose. I gotta choose. We all gotta choose our battles.
Right.
Like I said, I want to switch over to Hyperland. So am I going to do this or Impermanence, or am I going to change my notification app or my launcher, or am I going to work on this Nix ecosystem contribution? Gotta spread myself in some ways.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like what you're saying is Impermanence is kind of like every boot you swap to a clean new generation.
It basically just deletes files.
Right.
It does not pertain to the generation. It just simply deletes every file, and we're not talking about the files that are part of the OS build. Those are not. Those are put aside. Those are not touched.
Okay.
Every file that is other than those files, everything else is deleted. Other than that, what you have whitelisted.
Okay. This sounds like it would make a lot of sense in like a system administration context. Say you're managing a bunch of school computers and you want there to be a specific location on the drive where students can save whatever data they need to save, and everything else is just wiped clean on reboot. So if they do try to mess around with anything, it puts the system back into a known working state.
Yeah, I suppose. Probably use permissions for that use case.
Okay, sure.
I think this is more for cases where you want to be pedantic about, and you don't want to be like surprised. Oh, I actually had state in that directory that I cared about.
Right.
Because some server is maintaining some, writing to some files for some reason, and when you, let's say I need to now take this appliance and move it to a different computer, different machine, a different storage device. If I used Impermanence, I ended up with a whitelist of all the paths that I care about, so I know what paths I have data to migrate.
Okay, fair enough. One of the topics that came up earlier that I do want to sort of address more in, there was the discussion of how there's not the NixOS book. There's not this really nice onboarding process to bring someone up to speed. And this is something I often hear about Nix, where trying to understand how it all fits together turns people away quite quickly.
Yeah. Gosh, there's so much to learn.
Yeah, let's say you just have a ton of free time and you could say, I'm going to do all of this stuff to bring things up to the state I want it to be. What things would you like to see existing to make that process a lot easier for people?
What resources I would like to have existed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What resources, books, tutorials, what would you like there to be to give people a way to at least get their foot in the door and begin understanding this before they start delving into some of the more complex configuration like you have on your system?
It's such a difficult question because as a NixOS user, I have to be a Nix user. I have to learn some Nix commands. And there's a lot to learn there. So, but when the best resource to learn Nix is probably nix.dev. But if you go there, what you'll see is, because Nix is a tool for software development or for software composition or for building software. And so that documentation will be um, written for software people,
Right.
not for a Linux PC user.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be off-putting, but this is the tool, and this is what we got to learn. So if maybe the resource that I would like to see, the answer to your question, is documentation for NixOS that teaches only what is necessary in terms of Nix
Mm-hmm.
in order to get started with NixOS. I wish there was such a thing.
Can you guys hear me okay? I switched to my headphones.
Yes.
Okay, cool. But I think the line we gotta, no, like an interesting line to follow
Mhm.
is not trying to be the everything system for
Mhm.
everyone. Like distros already have channels, someone that wants more control, like the Arch wiki is great, but it veers more system administrator, someone that knows the guts a little more, same with Gen 2 versus something like Ubuntu.
Mhm.
So I don't know, like, I mean, I don't have a say in this at all, but this is just me like hypothesizing. Should NixOS have manuals that are like that accessible? It's fundamentally pretty complex.
Mhm.
Like it's doing things. So it could definitely be more welcoming
Mhm.
to even the group it's trying to tailor for, which is like a more system administrator mindset. But I don't know. I always try to tamp expectations, or like it's not like it's trying to be the next Mac OS, at least to me,
Sure.
right? Like that's like a really closed down system. You're not meant to change it, and that trade-off means it's incredibly easy to use.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
the fundamental thing here is like we're letting you change any knob. So there's like already some starting off complexity, so it definitely skews power user. And I think we'll
Right.
always skew power user-ish. And I don't know. Maybe some of the NixOS marketing teams could be like, don't say that or whatever, but
Mhm.
I think it's true. So I don't know. I'll say it.
So,
Yeah.
oh,
So the Nix language,
Mhm.
you can't avoid it. Can't avoid it. You can try to to avoid functions and use only adder sets and lists.
Mhm.
It's possible. But and maybe you can do that and then move forward, take it forward. But those functions are not. I think what we need, and actually I've started recently. Yesterday I launched a stub for that. I found a lot of a great value in the way that I have the pattern that I follow in my own repository,
Mhm.
which is public. That I shared it a few weeks ago. I shared it. I called it. I named the pattern, and some people decided that it's a great idea, and they spent hours and hours and hours converting their configurations to use this pattern,
Mhm.
and that inspired me to. Um, some of them even suggested it. Let's make it something. Let's make something of it. Let's make a homepage for this and start documenting it, because so many are coming into this. Interest is picking up.
Mhm.
This is what we're doing now, right? In your show,
Mhm.
Brody, and people are going to try to use it, and they're going to go through this pain.
Mhm.
There's a lot of learning,
Mhm. Mhm.
and if we can create resources, templates, perhaps a template, perhaps show them here. You can clone this repo and start tinkering around with it. And here are the set of commands that you need to know. Here's how you build your system, rebuild your system. Yeah, maybe resources like these can help.
I have actually a really good resource. I think you're going to agree with me, Don.
Mhm.
Nix, unlike any other distro, you get, because it's code based. I will just go into code search on GitHub, cs.github.com, write lang:nix, write the thing I want, and just endlessly browse settings, how they set up their machines. I'll learn little snippets. There's no other distro you're doing that in, right?
Yeah,
Now,
that's great.
the problem is, and this is like, I don't know the right way to solve this, is on one hand, it's great. GitHub has like amassed most of the open source stuff, right? Good or bad, however that falls out. But the code search on GitHub is good. But when people don't put it on GitHub, I can't search it. If they're on GitLab or some other forge, it's like not searchable at all, and I'm not learning from their thing. Now, I don't know, do I want to put them, the easiest would be to say move to GitHub, sorry. But maybe they don't want to because they have some personal philosophy they don't want to.
Sure.
So it may be a meta code search tailored just for Nix. Like to me, that's even more valuable than written prose documentation. That connects all these other forges where people could just register their Nix repo, and I could search. Like I was setting up also my VS Code, and I was just looking up all the different ways, patterns people are setting up their code to set up VS Code. And I was, just going through 100. There could have been the one I really wanted was on GitLab, and I missed it. Who knows? So some meta code search tool I think would be huge.
So like a nixexamples.com sort of deal. Where it's like,
but not static, like I'm searching live.
Right.
Like there's like live grep, I think it lets you search the Linux code base, like standing up a live grep instance for all the different Nix, and usually these like code search tools have like, they know the language, they could do symbol analysis and all the fancy stuff he was showing in his editor, the versions. Maybe we could do, like it could be custom tailored to Nix to let you browse it. And that would be that, at least for me. Like, so I don't know. Yeah, maybe not like super beginner, but I think really quickly after you have the basic material, you're just in like absorption mode. Like I need to see thousands of patterns because there's personal taste. Like he mentioned, he's advocating this new one, and it's not necessarily this new way to build a system. It's going to be one of many, and they're each going to have their pros and cons. And Nix lets you, and you could read about them, but you're going to want to, and someone might come up with a new one. So like there's just so much fact finding. That's good and bad. I like seeing all the variations and then plucking out one from obscurity. Like I love that. I'm going to use that in mine now. So something that would make that easier.
That's a great tip. Go into GitHub, turn the language to set the language to Nixlang or Nix, and then search for VS Code or whatever it is you're trying to set up for yourself. The greatest Nix expert. This is often not about Nix. The problem we're trying to solve is about, I don't know, the work around some issue that a program, that an application has. Let's see how others might have fixed this. I've done this countless times.
So, sort of shifting gears into another topic. One thing that I often hear about with Nix is the concept of flakes. And I don't fully understand what a flake is and what the value of just go from that. Like what are flakes and why do they exist and why would you use them? For anyone just listening, just like shaking his head.
Flakes they're problematic because they are not a single feature.
Right.
Ideally, historically, and I think everyone in the ecosystem, or most in the ecosystem, would agree that releasing this feature set with under one name called Flakes was not the brightest idea.
Mm-hmm.
I think in hindsight, it had been more useful to cut this down and multiple different features and then release them incrementally.
Right.
So that's I can tell you what is the feature set that is in Flakes.
Mm-hmm.
One of it is that by default the evaluation of the Nix language is pure,
Mm-hmm.
which one of the implications of that is otherwise by default when not using Flakes, the evaluation is, even though the idea of Nix is to have pure evaluation, I don't know why historically evaluation is not pure. What it means, for example, is that in impure you can read environment variables
Mm-hmm.
in the Nix language, which means the evaluation depends on something other than the Nix code.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's impure because one time you can set this environment variable and you get one result.
Mm-hmm.
And then I send it to my buddy and they run it and they get a different result.
Right.
Theoretically, how many times this actually happens, I don't know. But it's clearly a better idea to have pure evaluation. And in Flakes, evaluation is pure by default.
Mm-hmm.
Another feature of Flakes is that there is Flake inputs
mm-hmm.
and outputs.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of a schema. It's actually a partially defined schema. The part of it that is strict is that there are inputs and outputs, and there's a lock file
mm-hmm.
that locks those inputs. So I can define. May I show? I think it's best to show. I am using Flakes pretty much all the time. Did I share? There you go. When using Flakes, there must be a flake.nix file. And here is the flake.nix file of my same repository. I have my configurations. You can have a little bit of config here. You probably have some inputs because otherwise it's not very useful. And for example, if I search around, there should be find it this way. Here. Nix packages is the most significant input here. You can see its URL is defined as Nix packages, which is actually equivalent to GitHub NixOS /Nix packages.
Right.
And then this is a branch. If you remember the graph, this is the most recent branch of Nix packages that is cached. It has public cache. If you use master, then you would probably have to build many when you do a NixOS rebuild. You probably end up locally compiling frequently things, whatever, the Linux kernel, anything that has been updated on master since it reached Nix packages unstable. So typically a desktop, like PC desktop user would want to use Nix packages unstable. So these are inputs, and I have lots of them. Nix on Droid is a fun little thing. Nix index database has to do with that comma program we saw earlier. Here's Home Manager, which is the part that lets us manage user home directories So users they can have their own programs and their own configuration files managed as well, not only the operating system.
I think we should touch on like why
And
before
here's the
Flake,
Flake.
but before Flakes was even a thing,
Mhm.
you'd import Nix packages in another way. Maybe he can demo it later.
Yes.
There's an import command. It doesn't
Yes.
matter.
Mhm.
You can show
That
it. The original problem was, and you might have your code and you'll import Nix packages at a particular version, and you want to depend on another piece of software outside of Nix packages. They might also, like everything needs Nix packages. So they probably also import Nix packages. So now I want to build my piece of software. I've imported Nix packages. They imported Nix packages. Maybe I have a third piece of software. Oh my God, they imported Nix packages. I have 3 Nix packages right now. Nothing's actually wrong with that.
Right.
Everything would work, but it's very, very large.
Right.
Is one problem. So I think he hit the nail on the head. It's like a bunch of features, but one of them, when it starts to get to the schema, was the capability to also say, I'm going to have 1 Nix packages. And when I start to import other things, I want you guys to use this 1 Nix package. That's good and bad. Like a lot of people tend to do that because we value more sometimes space. I just want a nice 1 graph. But the trade-off here is you're changing what someone said they've tested it against. There's this software author, and they said, I've only tested it against Nix packages 23.11. And I'm saying, nah, use 24.05. These are release versions, and consolidate them all to this one. Flakes makes that very easy. You could do this. The thing with Flakes is you could do everything without Flakes. That's what I mean, I just use Flakes now also because I was the longest holdout. It just makes a lot of these things easier to do, but I think that was one of the big ones. So this whole schema and stuff, but I just wanted to me, that was like one of the big ones. That was like why I think the impurity was also another really good one you mentioned. But yeah,
even before Flakes and without Flakes, there are ways to pin dependencies like Nix packages or whatever else other repositories I'm bringing into my evaluation. And so there are ways to not use Flakes, and that's fine. This Flakes provides a certain built-in mechanism for pinning dependencies, and we saw that for a moment in the log file there. It's automatically generated, and it will pin the dependencies to Git revisions, and it can be bumped. And that's what I do occasionally. In order to bump. Would you like to see a demonstration of what it looks like to bump my
Yeah, sure.
bumping NixOS configuration? See whether there are updates?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay. Currently, I need to click more than once here in order to share the screen. Okay. So I'll go to infra repo. I'll cancel this. I'll restore to undo the change that I made. What I need to do is Nix Flake update. This will bump all the inputs, but the most significant one is Nix packages. That's where most of my software comes from. And here it is downloading. It just finished. And here it is unpacking and copying it to the store. And I get a report of NUR. This is like AUR. This is NUR, Nix user.
Right.
Repo. This is home manager, Nix packages, and Nix Vim, that I use to configure my NeoVim with. the inputs have been updated, but I didn't rebuild anything yet.
Right.
What I'm going to do is I do nix flake check. Let's make it verbose. And this will check all of the checks. It will build all of the checks that I have in this repository, which include 2 desktops and a laptop, and the code formatting, the code style in this repository, and some other less significant things.
I find the biggest, we've been so focused on NixOS, and I think that's been great. To me, Flakes and NixOS is a bit more of a non-starter, like just use Flakes.
Sure.
But for another big avenue people get into Nix is for project development. That's a whole nother also podcast. You can like write a file and do all the Nix stuff, but for a repo only. And that had, I think, where I think at least my own personal history with Flakes, why I was very slow to come around, was the project way to do it was much easier before. Like Flakes has a lot more ceremony, and you used to be able to just write something called like a shell.nix file. It was way simpler. It looked more like a file. You just threw the packages you wanted and called it a day, instead of like all this input and lock files. And so, it didn't seem like you got much more out of it. NixOS, just everything just tends to, when you start up a new OS, you're probably starting from Flake, so it's like that's why I think less of an issue.
Right.
I think people are making it now more of an issue than it is. I mean, they've published stats at all the NixCons. It's like mostly because more of the users have started off now. Like the community's just growing insane, like exponentially. They only know Flakes from the get-go.
Right.
So its user base like is very huge. So it's almost comical that it's still such a intention. It's just for like old farts like me that like had our old way of doing it, and we were like, it was fine. But even me, I'm like, it's whatever.
Personally, being someone from like outside of this space, I'm not even aware of this like the fact that there is issues regarding whether you use Flakes or you don't use Flakes. Like the only time I hear about the concept of a flake, but I never hear about any of that additional stuff that goes along with it. I think that's why people who are getting interested in it do ask about it, because they hear about people arguing about it, but they don't really know, like, especially if they're seeing a new system where Flakes are there from the start, they don't really see why this is a point of discussion to begin with. So they're kind of interested in why this is happening.
Oh, and I mean, you have to enable it too. I think that like they're like, this is my default. I think that's probably it too. It's like it's the default for us all, and it's still experimental or whatever is the label, and you have to like explicitly enable the feature set. So, and that's probably the real kerfuffle. But yeah,
you may have noticed that a check failed here, and this check is telling me that actually I have formatting that is not well. I think I did this yesterday, and I did not do a check. So what I'm going to do is git stash my log file changes, and then run a nix fmt to format all the files. Now I'm going to add this formatting change, commit it, say oops, and git stash pop to have my log file changes again, and then I'll run nix flake check again. And this is a good demonstration of after the evaluation that will occur, none of the build steps that finished will run again.
Right.
None of the things that have been downloaded will be downloaded, of course. We're not going to do extra work now.
Right, things that have already been confirmed as good, you don't need to do again, basically.
Yes.
You have to trust us on that. It's tough to tough to prove when it's like zooming text, but like we know it's true.
One of the things to note here that I find noteworthy that during this Nix Flake check, 2 desktops and a laptop will be built and will end up in the Nix store. Which means that after this is hopefully successful, the command to switch to this new OS generation will be instantaneous because they're already in the Nix store.
Minus the evaluation, but yeah.
With Flakes, they get evaluation caching, so that will be instant as well.
Way to pull out another plus for the Flakes right there.
So how long would this process normally take? Like, is this longer on his system because of his advanced configuration, or like what's the process here?
Oh, it finished. This is, for example, this one package GNOME session was rebuilt. Some things here rebuild because I'm using Stylix, which I totally recommend. It's a project that applies the same color scheme and the same fonts to a great number of parts of the system and applications in one go.
Right.
So everything gets styled. So I think the way it works is that it has to rebuild some packages. I'm willing to put up with that. As you can see, this didn't take too long, and it succeeded. So that's nice. So what I'm going to do is take a look at the Git status here. Yep, that's what I've expected. The only thing that was modified is the Flake log. And now I'm going to do NixOS switch dot and hope that nothing significant enough occurs that it breaks my connection to our call. Or my audio, or my screen share. I get this summary again where I can go over the packages that were changed, the versions. Normally I would give it a little bit more attention, but since we're on the call, I'll just say, oh, okay, all right. Get some updates. And here is where the actual switch occurs. Now I saw my screen flash.
I thought we lost you for a second there.
It restarted his network.
Okay, that makes sense.
But like the rebuild can take everyone's configuration is going to take different. Like I have some personal software in mind. So when I change some stuff, sometimes I'm waiting way longer, like recompiling everything.
Right.
So it's like tough to say what if you're doing no customizations whatsoever, everything should just be downloaded off the cache. But pretty quickly you end up tweaking something and then really quickly recompiling.
And if we run this list generations again, command, you can see, and I go all the way to the end, you can see that we have one from, this is my time. So this is the one we just built, and it's the current one. It's kind of the current one because if it had the new kernel, I would not have been running it. So it cannot switch the kernel in the live system yet.
Right.
And that's that. That was bumping the inputs on an NixOS.
With Flakes.
with Flakes and with
So there's one last big thing I do want to touch on, and this is honestly could have just been an entire episode unto itself, but here we are anyway. So I want to talk a little bit about reproducibility. This is a topic that is a lot of distros are working on, and I often hear the idea of reproducible builds and Nix in the same sentence.
Nix makes a good effort to produce very similar artifacts, but it's not as strict as to try to produce the same artifact every time. What will be the same every time are the build instructions, what's called a derivation, that recipe. That is the completely reproducible part. Means the Nix language code that I write will deterministically get evaluated into the same derivation every time. Now, derivation is a recipe for how to build whatever artifact. That consists of typically a bash script with all sorts of dependencies, because you need a compiler, you need some libraries. But Nix has no control over the programs. The compiler, what it does, Nix can specify, I want exactly this compiler, or the recipe to produce that compiler, actually, right? So every time you build something, it may or may not be exactly the same artifact. For example, if for some reason the current time is used in the build artifact, it will never be the same. And Nix says, okay, this is reasonable. We're aiming for that level of reproducibility. We want to reproduce the build instructions. That's a reasonable thing to do. Having said that, that's the default kind of derivation. For other kinds of derivations, we can force complete reproducibility, and we want to do that in some cases. The most common case we want to do that in is a derivation that the purpose of it, which is to fetch a remote resource, such as fetching the source code of some program. When I fetch the source code of some program from GitHub or from a tarball somewhere, I want to make sure that the exact contents are verified every time. It's exact contents every time. So, but this is a security, right? Like, let's say I manually checked out that source code. I reviewed it. Maybe a team has reviewed it. I don't know what context we're talking about. And this is known safe, known good. So Nix provides a means to make such derivations, where they're called fixed output derivations, because their output is fixed, and it's fixed using a hash of the content of that derivation. And we, again, have to use that for fetching.
So I'm sure there's a lot more we could definitely cover. I'm sure there's plenty more about Nix to say. But if there's anything that you feel like is very important we should address before we end, let me know and we can touch on that.
Check out nix.dev. Feel free to ask questions in discourse.nixos.org or on the unofficial NixOS Discord. The matrix, NixOS matrix, there are many rooms. The Nix community is making heavy use of the matrix network. And there's also a NixOS Reddit. There are actually several. And there's a Zulip recently. It's called NixOS Asia, I believe. I do want to show a meme.
Okay, sure.
Before we finish. Let me just find it first.
Okay.
While you do that, I'll share my little blurb. I was kind of at the start a little, maybe don't worry if you don't want to use Nix or whatever. But at the same time, if you want to use Nix, don't be put off that you don't get it. There's still I'm 8 years, 10 years into using Nix, and actually I was looking at Don's that new pattern he was talking about, and I don't get it. Nix is you need someone to hold your hand a lot of the time, and there's no shame in that. It took me I don't know, 5 different attempts to learn it until I finally got it. It has that same feeling of when people used to have install parties for Linux, because you needed someone to help guide you through the process. But there was a lot of reward. It's a very passionate community. It's fun. It's just straight up fun, which I think has that excitement and joy. So if you're looking at it and you're like, gosh, it doesn't have this self-starter feeling, I can't do it, that's okay. Find a friend. Just ask. People want to help you. I help white glove people into NixOS systems all the time. They call it red pilling. And to be red pilled, you have to be handed the pill. Someone has to, right? Morpheus gave him the pill. He didn't take it. You don't just find it yourself and take it. So, don't worry about that.
Yeah. Here's the meme I wanted to show.
Okay.
There. I hope no one gets upset. It's just all in good humor. Obviously, I like it because I'm a Nix user. This is based off of an incident that happened at sea, where this is a pirate. This man's a pirate, and this man's maybe the captain of a ship, and pirates boarded that ship, and the man said, "Look at me, I'm the captain now."
I think most people have probably seen the meme format.
I love Nix loves taking all the arch memes, like that one, and just taking it one step further. There's the one with the increasingly large beards that go to. Have you seen that one? It's Ubuntu, Debian, and then it all goes to Linux from scratch. It's down to the floor, and then Nix is endless. So I love that.
A man sitting in their own beard.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I shaved this morning.
I think, as I said before, I think there's definitely more we could talk about for sure. But I hope that this has been a more approachable episode on Nix. And I hope that some of those terms that were used last time make a bit more sense now, especially with the graphical demonstrations of how some of these basic things work, like doing that switch, actually building everything, looking at the Nix files and how these modules work. I hope with all that, it does give people a better understanding of how this all fits together. And I can't speak for anyone watching, but at least for me, I do think I have a better understanding of what is going on. I'm still happy on the Arch. I'm happy on my system. I'm not going to use Nix anytime soon. I've got some laptops sitting up on my shelf. Maybe I'll chuck Nix on one of those at some point and give it a shot. But I do think that it makes a lot more sense now. And I hope that people watching this get that feeling as well.
Yeah.
If you want to ask, I'd be happy to. Maybe if you want to have a machine that you would like to try NixOS on, I'd be happy to come on and walk you through it.
Or find someone. What me and one of my best friends we do is we bought the exact same laptop, like everything, and we share the exact same config. And it's like
great idea.
Kind of like, so when I open up my laptop, I see his user. And we use Tailscale, whatever, it's this like VPN thing, and he'll just SSH because he has a user on my laptop with his password.
Right.
Like I'll be on my laptop and he'll just SSH in and write on my wall, like send me something on the wall. And I just think like you could do really weird, fun stuff like that. So you're just one peer away from finding your Linux, your laptop soulmate, and then you can have the same config as them.
So I don't have plans to do that, but that does sound fun. I guess we'll just where can people find, like, I don't know if you have much of a social media presence, Farid, but Shahar, like, don't let people know where they can find your show, and if people want to go learn more about Nix.
Farid has a blog. He's been writing advanced even esoterical things about
If you do want to
Nix.
direct people to something, if you got a blog that you want to talk about,
I forgot about that. You guys you're doing good marketing for me. My blog, I do write a lot about Nix. It's F Zakaria. I don't know if you could write it in like some show notes or something later.
I'll get it in the description.
I write pretty approachable. I am a endless idiot, is what I like to think. I like to break things down into like really basic primitives, and that's what I like to write about. And thanks for reminding me.
Farid, I think you are an out-of-the-box thinker. I would have never tried to write about stuff that you write about. Interesting blog if you want to get deep into the bowels of Nix. I recommend it.
What about your own stuff?
My primary online presence is github.com/mightyIam. Mighty I am. And my podcast, fulltimenix.com.
Is that just on the website? Is there an RSS feed for it and all that?
It's pretty much in every podcast app you can think of.
Awesome. Nothing else either of you wanted to mention?
Good luck with NixOS.
Perfect. I'll do my outro and then we can sign off. So, my main channel is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos there 6-ish days a week. Sometimes I also stream. Check that out if you want to see. I did a Cosmic stream recently. That's fun. They're always fun to mess around with alpha software. I've got the gaming channel, Brody on Games. I stream there twice a week. Right now, I'll be playing through Ori and the Blind Forest and the first Berserker Kazan. Very fun games. If you're watching the video version of this, you can find the audio version basically on any podcast platform. There is an RSS feed as well, which is cool. Spotify has video, which, if you care about that. If you're listening to the audio version of this, I would recommend going back and looking at the video. There are a lot of visual demonstrations that I think are valuable. That is on YouTube at TechOverT. So, I don't ever tell people they're doing this, but I like to let them do the final word and sign off the episode. So, what do you want to say?
Thank you for listening to Tech Over Tea. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, rate, and do you take sponsorships?
Yeah, no, I don't have one right now, but I do.
Then consider sponsoring Brody. Some excellent content. Thank you for having us here,
Absolute
Brody.
pleasure.
I'll do this again anytime.
Likewise.
Awesome.